Hi. I don't tan. Here's my life story, so let's just jump right in. I get tan very easily. It's really easy for me to get tan. Basically, if I go outside, it's sunny and it's summer, I will get brown / yellow / green sometimes immediately. I get this kind of olive tan, and the more I'm in the sun, the darker it is, obviously. So that's one thing. So when I was a kid, I was obviously spending a lot of time in the sun. So from late spring till the end of the summer, I was super tan. I didn't really mind it because I was a kid, like I didn't care about my appearance at all. So I was just like, well, it's funny, it happens, and you know, when you go in the sun, that's what it does to you. When I started to get a little bit older, I noticed that I actually don't like the way I look when I'm tan. And it's not like I don't like people being tan, because it's just a personal preference. It's just about what I don't like about my appearance. But I've noticed that when I get tan, there is just something about the shade of my skin combined with my hair, with my facial features, that it all just kind of blends into this one spot of color. I don't know why, but I've noticed that when I'm really tan, like in the summer, my facial features would blend, and like my eyebrows would kind of disappear, my eyes would get smaller, my nose would get lost somewhere. And again, it's a personal preference, but I was kind of like, well, I don't really like it, but you know, it happens, it's sunny, I get tan. But I didn't really get why my friends would do it on purpose, and they would get really excited over how tan they were, and they would come back from like their vacation and they will go like, look at me, I'm so tan, and I'm like, you look pretty much the same to me. Your skin is just like a tone darker. And my pale friends would be really embarrassed for being pale, and they would just be like, oh, I really need to get tan soon because this is ridiculous, like I look like a zombie. I was just really confused about why were people so obsessed about being tan. Like as soon as the first spring / summer sun broke in, they would just go like, oh, let's go tan. In my case, it just happened because I was very active in the summer, and because I didn't really use any filter cream because I was too lazy or I forgot. But I felt this kind of like pressure from my peers, even though I didn't really, like, it didn't appeal to me, but I did feel like a lot of my peers were kind of like pressured into getting it. So let's jump to a short history of tan, courtesy of me. So it's funny because throughout the history, being pale was sort of like a status symbol, and it basically happened because rich, wealthy people wouldn't have to work outside. They could just stay at home the whole damn day, and even if they had to go outside, they would just be carried around in carriages or whatever. They just could afford to be pale. Whereas working class people, they didn't care. Like, they had some more important matters on their minds, so they would just work their asses off in the sunshine, and that is why their skin would usually be tan. So for centuries, there was a distinction. Nobility and gentry would usually try to be as pale as possible. Obviously there were a ton of like naturally tan people, but the goal was not to get those skins any darker. So there was this fun distinction, quite racist actually, between pale as in noble and tan as in poor. And then that began to change around early 20th century, when doctors started noticing that sun actually has beneficial effects on people's health. And they were like, well, maybe you actually need to go outside from time to time. And also, as women began to be more involved in sports and more active at the end of the 19th century, obviously an attitude changed a bit. You still tried to cover as much of your skin as possible to avoid the sunlight, but you also kept in mind that you might get tan, like it happens. Also, a lot of people started going to the beach, and in the early 20th century it sort of went from being a very strict environment where you had a sort of like a bathing machine where you changed and you went inside the sea, and then you went inside the bathing machine. In the early 20th century it sort of went into this whole beach culture, so you would no longer be constricted to this bathing machine environment, but you would spend more time on the beach. Basically, a lot of people just had fun in the sun. So around 1920s, which is after World War One, it was already so popular that it started to be a thing. And all of a sudden, being pale, though it was not looked down upon, was not the only option. Like, you could get tan, and that suggested that you're really sporty, really active, you're the sort of independent woman, which suddenly was also a thing. And all of a sudden, people wanted to get tan because it meant that they were healthy and outgoing and really active. And this is sort of the way it has stayed throughout the years. Fast forward to nowadays obsession with getting tan, which sort of went from one extreme to the other. It went from going, oh, I can't expose my hands to the sun or else I would be considered working class, to if I don't get tan, I would be so pale that people would stare at me or think I'm sick, which is also not the best option, I think. I think we should accept that some people get tan, some people are tan naturally, but some people are really pale. They get red as soon as they reach the sunlight, and they would never get a tan, like a proper tan. I'm not one of those people, but I know a lot of people that struggle with that and are really frustrated because they go out in the sun and they're like, oh, all I get is this weird redness, like I'll never get a tan. So what? You'll never get a tan, but you have a beautiful pale skin. Like, no one cares. It's not the reason why I don't tan though, but it's just something that made me think, why are we so obsessed with it? Especially that not so long ago it was exactly the opposite. So again, the reason I don't tan is because I don't like the way I look when I'm tan. I've always liked myself more in the winter. I'm a winter person. Like, I love winter time, I love snow, I love autumn, I'm okay with spring. Summer is my least favorite time of the year, honestly. So why would I want to tan in summer and then have the consequences of that in the autumn, which is my favorite time of the year? I don't think I like the sun that much. I don't like feeling hot. I don't like lying on the beach for the sole purpose of getting a tan. Like, I get bored. Around 2015, when I was more into retro style, I think someone I followed on Instagram mentioned the 50 SPF filter, and I was like, oh, so those exist. And I honestly, before that, I kind of assumed there is no way of not getting a tan if your skin is sort of like tan prone. But then I discovered, no, there is actually a filter that blocks out the sunlight, and maybe it's not the super healthy option to just block out the sunlight the whole time, but it is an option. So I bought it and I was like, well, how much wrong? And it turned out, yeah, that's what I was looking for my entire life. Like, I just don't want to get a tan and that's it. I'm not super obsessed about it. If I forget applying my sunscreen before I leave my house, I'll just leave my house because I'm lazy. If I can go in the shadow instead of in direct sunlight, I'll go in the shadow, but that's more because I'll just be a little bit cooler. So I usually start using it around springtime when it gets really sunny, and then I use it throughout the summer if I remember to use it. I use it when I'm on holidays because that's where I usually do a lot of sightseeing and, you know, beach time. So just so I don't get sunburned, it's probably for the better if I use it anyway. And usually my friends or people I meet, they don't even notice that I don't tan because I'm naturally, like, my skin naturally is not super pale. So it's not like I'm super pale and, you know, you notice that. No, I'm just not tan. And it's funny because even though people don't notice that I don't tan, they assume I don't tan because I wear vintage clothes, which is actually funny because in 1940s tanning was a thing, was a huge thing. It's not like they all wanted to be pale anyway. And sometimes people assume that it's not like I don't like getting a tan, it's like I'm obsessed with being pale, which I think are two different things. It's about maintaining what skin I naturally have versus trying to get it pale. Like, I don't use anything to make my skin whiter than it is, which is the thing is, like, I don't care whatever skin tone or skin color anyone has. It's honestly about my own preferences when it comes to my own skin. And it probably sounds kind of shallow to be bothered by something as simple as that, but I think we all have our own, like, quirks and things we don't like about ourselves that we like to change in order to make ourselves feel better, because it's not really about looking better. Simple as that. If you like to tan, I'm completely fine with that, though I'd be happier knowing that you do it because you like being tan. It's one of those social expectations that no one is really complaining about because everyone seems to agree on it, but I think it needs more conversation. That's it. Go enjoy your holiday and get a tan or don't. I don't care.